you can create a graffiti piece on paper. A graffiti piece means that you have really done a lot of planning and put a lot of careful attention and detail into your graffiti. If you're going to do a name or a word, then you have to count the number of letters that are in it. If it has an odd number of letters, then the middle letter will line up in the middle. If it has an even number of letters, then 2 letters will line up in the middle. So for the name Kendra, I counted 6 letters, and that means my N and my D are in the middle, and then I'll write out from there. I also have a bunch of style sheets, which you can find on the internet. The word joy is an odd number of letters, so the middle letter lines up right in the midline of the rectangle. Do a lot of practicing in your journal or on a scrap piece of paper. Study the characters, or you can just use bubble letters. When I look at the O, this is how I talk to myself. I see an egg shape with a little oval inside. I see a drop shadow down on the bottom and the right. For the Y, I see 2 flat tops, a tiny little V, big swooshing bottom, flat bottom, and I kind of talk myself through what I'm seeing while I recreate that letter on top of my ghost letter. You can also do some experimentation with color and re-practice any letters that you don't like the look of. After you create your graffiti style letters, you will erase your ghost lettering in this project. This yellow is really dry, but I wanted to see what it looked like to kind of ombre down from yellow into a brown, see if it could look like golden letters. So really take your time with experimentation before you begin on your watercolor paper. The paper I'm providing is about 18 inches long, so I'm going to measure halfway across and just make some little tick marks so I know where to line up my letters. Because the name Kendra is an even number of letters, I will start with those 2 middle letters. If it were an odd number of letters, I would start with 1 central letter. And then I'm going to use ghostly pencil to see if I can lay out the name in a way that evenly spreads the letters across the paper and they don't go off the sides or go too close to the top or too close to the bottom. We want to have some room. We want the letters to be pretty large and pretty spacious, so you can make them big and chunky if you want. Here I am applying the bubble technique, where I just kind of act like there's a magnetic force field around the skeleton of each letter and draw my bubbles going around. Inside of my letters, I use my little squinchy triangle technique for the D, the R, and the A. Once you love your pencil work, that's when you can get a permanent marker and trace your outlines. And then erase the skeleton. Do not trace your skeleton lines. The next thing to do is any of your outside little add-ons. I would love for you to do a shell because this creates an area where you can make a barrier between your watery letters and what happens outside of them once we start using our color and our watercolor. I'm using a cloud formation, which is just a series of differently sized U's. There's a lot of other options that you can look at either in my classroom or online. So here I am. I created shines in the upper right hand corner and I added some white crayon inside of those shines. I added some blue crayon around all of my letters inside that shell, and I added some red crayon down below. That means it's time to start to add my water-based materials. For this, I'm using a Crayola water-based marker and doing a light, even coat inside each letter. Since I want to use the ombre effect in here, I'm going to do the tops with one color, the middles with a second color and the bottoms with a third color. And here I'm finishing up my bottom color, which is a darker purple. It makes sense to go light on top and dark below because that's usually how light works in our world. Things can be bright and shiny on top, and then they're usually shaded from underneath because light comes from above in most circumstances. And the really fun part happens now. You can use some water on your brush, just a medium amount of water, to begin to blur your watercolor marker. This paper I'm using is super absorbent, so it's blending a little bit less easily than some other kinds of watercolor paper. It will depend on what kind you have. But it's still with some gentle swirling of the brush, moving the pigment around and kind of blurring all of the lines and starting to look a bit like spray paint. The waxy crayon is resisting the watercolor, so those shines are going to stay bright white, and my shell is going to keep all the water inside the letters. And as a finishing touch, because this paper holds moisture so well, I wanted to add some real watercolor in to blur what I already had going, kind of going in with a similar color, using the papers already being moist to do a really subtle blend, kind of like we'd see in spray paint work. I'm just kind of blending the colors a bit more, adding kind of a juicier color. A few more finishing touches, and with a lot of work and focus, you will have a beautiful piece.